Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a heated argument. Your heart pounds in your chest. Every word you say feels like a weapon. Every sentence a battle. You carefully craft your next response, determined to prove that you are right. But the other person? They're doing exactly the same thing. Neither of you is truly listening. Instead, you're both waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Now imagine someone steps into this scene. They don't pick a side. They don't shout or demand to be heard. Instead, they lean in and whisper something unsettling in your ear. You have already lost. How can that be? You're defending yourself, standing your ground. How can this possibly mean defeat? Because according to Friedrich Nietzsche, the moment you engage in this kind of battle, the moment you react, argue, and fight to prove you're right, you've already surrendered your power. This might sound counterintuitive. We've all been taught that winning arguments is a sign of strength, that defending your ideas shows confidence and power. But Nietzsche offers a different perspective. True strength, he argues, does not come from fighting to be right. It comes from something far more unexpected. So, what exactly is this hidden power? And why does silence often speak louder than words? Let's dive into Nietzsche's philosophy and uncover the silent trick that gives you real power. Most people believe power comes from winning arguments, proving others wrong, and dominating conversations. But Nietzsche believed something else entirely. He believed power is not in words, it is in control. Why do people argue in the first place? If you've ever found yourself in a heated argument, you know how quickly things can escalate. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself why we argue at all? Nietzsche would say that most arguments aren't about truth. They are about deeper psychological needs, ego protection. People argue because their identity is at stake. Accepting that you are wrong feels like losing a part of yourself, and the mind resists this at all costs. Most debates are power struggles, battles for dominance. Who speaks last? Who controls the tone? Who makes the other back down? Some people argue not because they believe in their point, but because they want to be seen as smart, confident, or strong by others. Nietzsche saw these behaviors as signs of weakness. Those who react emotionally in arguments are being controlled by others. The moment you let someone provoke you, you have already lost. His famous concept of the will to power is often misunderstood. It's not about brute force or physical domination. It's about the ability to impose your will on reality. And this does not always require words. Sometimes the strongest power is the ability not to react. This is where Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, the ideal superior individual, comes in. The Übermensch is not emotionally reactive like most people. He does not argue just to win or prove a point. Instead, he chooses when to engage and when to remain silent. Because power isn't about talking. It's about controlling the entire interaction. Imagine a meeting where two people are arguing. One is loud, aggressive, trying desperately to prove they're right. The other is calm, collected, listening more than speaking. They don't get dragged into emotional back and forths. But when they finally speak, their words are powerful, well-timed, and shift the entire conversation. Who really holds the power here? Nietzsche would say it's the person who stays in control, who doesn't react emotionally. Why is strategic silence more powerful than winning arguments? Because silence, when used correctly, is not weakness. It's a psychological weapon. Silence forces the other person to reveal more about themselves. It makes them feel uncertain. It makes them second-guess their own words. It creates tension. And tension makes people uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, you gain control. The Übermensch doesn't just stay silent in arguments. He uses silence as a tool, a pause, a moment of restraint, a well-timed response that flips the conversation in his favor. This is why Nietzsche's version of power isn't about fighting. It's about mastering the battlefield before the fight even begins. Silence is not just the absence of words. It's a tool, a weapon wielded by history's greatest minds to dominate battles of intellect, business, and war. Nietzsche's idea of power was never about loud arguments or winning debates. It was about influence, control, and strategic restraint. In this first part, we've uncovered the illusion that winning arguments equals power. We've seen that reacting emotionally gives your power away. And we've introduced Nietzsche's radical idea. True power often lies in silence and control. In the next part, we'll explore exactly how Nietzsche's philosophy of power and silence works, and why mastering this silent power can change your life. Stay tuned. Now that we've seen how reacting emotionally in arguments surrenders your power, let's dig deeper into Nietzsche's philosophy of power itself and the role of silence as a strategic tool. Nietzsche introduced the concept of the Übermensch, the overman or superman, a superior individual who transcends ordinary human reactions. This Übermensch doesn't argue just to win or prove a point. He chooses carefully when to engage and when to remain silent, because real power is not in talking. It's in controlling the entire interaction. Imagine a room where two people argue. One is loud, aggressive, trying to dominate and prove they're right. The other stays calm, listens more than they speak, doesn't get dragged into emotional exchanges. When this calm person finally speaks, their words are powerful, precise, and shift the entire dynamic. Who really holds the power here? Nietzsche's answer: the calm one, the one who controls their emotions and reactions. Silence is not weakness. When wielded wisely, silence is a powerful weapon. It forces your opponent to fill the void. It unsettles them. It forces them to reveal more about their thoughts and insecurities. This creates tension, a discomfort that gives you leverage. When people are uncomfortable, they lose control, and control is power. Nietzsche's Übermensch doesn't just stay silent. He uses silence strategically. A pause here, a moment of restraint there, a well-timed word that turns the conversation around. Throughout history, silence has been the tool of the greatest minds, intellectuals, leaders, warriors, who knew when to speak and when to hold back. Silence can be a sword sharper than any spoken word. But let's make one thing clear. Silence is not about avoiding conflict or running away from challenges. It's about mastering the battlefield before the fight even begins. Silence isn't the absence of power. It's the presence of control. Think about the last time you were in a conversation where someone paused before answering, not because they didn't know what to say, but because they were choosing their words like a master. How did that make you feel? You leaned in. You listened more closely. This is the silent power Nietzsche describes. So how do you become this Übermensch in your daily life? How do you master silence and control your interactions? It begins with self-mastery, controlling your emotions, observing before reacting, choosing your battles. When someone tries to provoke you, don't jump in immediately. Pause, breathe, observe. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Am I reacting emotionally, or am I controlling my response? Will my words move the situation forward, or are they just noise? This mindset turns arguments from chaotic battles into calculated maneuvers. Remember, words are currency. Spend them wisely. The Übermensch doesn't waste energy on pointless fights. He waits for the moment that truly matters. Then he strikes with precision. In the next part, we'll see how some legendary figures embodied this philosophy, using silence and strategic control to gain power without unnecessary conflict. You've learned that true power isn't loud or brash. It's calm, silent, and controlling. It's the ability to master the battlefield before any words are spoken. Stay with me. Next, we'll explore stories from history's greatest minds who lived this silent power every day. So far, we've learned that true power isn't in loud arguments or emotional reactions. It's in silence, control, and strategic restraint. But this isn't just theory. History is filled with powerful individuals who mastered this silent art and changed the world. Let's explore 3 legendary figures who perfectly embodied Nietzsche's philosophy of power through silence: Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Miyamoto Musashi. Socrates, winning without fighting. Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, never raised his voice or shouted down opponents. He didn't try to force his ideas or attack others directly. Instead, he used a simple but powerful technique: the Socratic method. The Socratic method is a way of questioning that gently guides others to expose their own contradictions. Imagine a proud Athenian politician claims to be the wisest man in the city. Instead of outright challenging him, Socrates asks one question: what is wisdom? The politician, eager to prove his intellect, begins defining wisdom. But with every question Socrates asks, the definition starts to fall apart. The once confident politician stumbles over his own words. He realizes he doesn't truly grasp the concept he boasted about. Socrates didn't tell people they were wrong. He made them realize it themselves. This is the essence of silent power. Instead of arguing, question. Instead of proving, guide others to discover the truth on their own. Steve Jobs, the art of controlled conflict. Next, let's jump to modern times and look at Steve Jobs, the visionary leader behind Apple. Jobs didn't avoid arguments, but he didn't waste energy on petty debates either. He orchestrated arguments strategically. Jobs' leadership was not about debating every detail. It was about controlling the larger conversation. One famous example is his battle with engineers over the iPhone's design. Engineers wanted physical buttons. Jobs wanted a full touchscreen. Instead of arguing endlessly, Jobs let them debate and express concerns. Then, through guidance and persuasion, he led them to see that a touchscreen device was not only possible, it was inevitable. Jobs didn't tell people what to think. He made them believe it was their idea all along. Most people argue out of ego, to prove they're right. Jobs argued with purpose, to win people over. If your words don't move people to action, they're just noise. Miyamoto Musashi, the silent samurai. Finally, let's visit the battlefield with Miyamoto Musashi, Japan's undefeated samurai. Musashi won over 60 duels, but not just through physical skill. His greatest victories were psychological. He played mind games that unsettled opponents before the battle even began. One famous duel was against Sasaki Kojiro, a master swordsman known for deadly speed. Musashi arrived hours late to the duel, making Kojiro furious. When they finally faced off, Kojiro was blinded by anger. He made mistakes. Musashi defeated him with ease. Musashi knew that if your enemy is emotional, they are already weak. Nietzsche's philosophy aligns perfectly here. The Übermensch does not react emotionally. He controls the reactions of others. Musashi proved that silence, patience, and psychological dominance are often more powerful than brute force. What do Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Musashi all have in common? They never wasted energy on useless arguments. They did not react emotionally. They dictated the terms of engagement. They understood that true power is not in words. It's in influence. These examples show us that power is a game of control. It's a game where silence and patience are powerful weapons. In the next part, we'll dive into the psychology behind arguments, why we argue, why we lose control, and how you can avoid these traps. Now that we've seen how legendary figures mastered silent power, let's examine the psychology behind arguments. Why we argue, why we lose control, and how to avoid falling into these traps. Why do arguments escalate so quickly? Why do conversations so often turn into battles? The answer lies not in logic or facts, but in psychology. Our brains want to win, not to learn. They are wired with cognitive biases that make us terrible at arguing rationally. One of the biggest culprits is confirmation bias. This is the tendency to seek out information that confirms what we already believe, while ignoring anything that challenges it. Then there's the backfire effect. When someone challenges our beliefs instead of changing our minds, we often double down, becoming even more convinced we are right. And the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less we know about something, the more confident we become in our opinions. These biases mean most arguments are pointless. Nobody truly listens. Everyone just waits for their turn to speak. Nietzsche's Übermensch avoids these traps. He listens carefully. He observes. He chooses whether the conversation is worth engaging in. But there's more. Arguments aren't just cognitive. They are deeply emotional. Have you ever wondered why some arguments make you furious, while others don't bother you at all? It's because we don't argue over logic. We argue over identity. When someone challenges our beliefs, it feels like a personal attack. We feel like we ourselves are being attacked. This is why debates about politics, religion, or philosophy often turn ugly so fast. Because people don't just feel like their ideas are challenged, they feel like they are attacked. The most powerful people in history never argue emotionally. If someone can make you emotional, they control you. The Übermensch does not fall for this trap. He observes, analyzes, then decides whether or not to respond. At the core of most arguments lies the need for validation. People argue not to find truth, but to be seen as right. Nietzsche understood this deeply. Most humans seek approval from the herd. They argue to gain social validation. But the Übermensch doesn't need validation. He creates his own truth. He focuses on his vision. He lets actions speak louder than words. Think about the most influential figures in history. Did they waste time arguing with critics? They focused on their vision, ignored distractions, and let their actions do the talking. Modern psychology confirms Nietzsche's insights. Studies show that the most powerful people in any group aren't the ones who talk the most. They are the ones who control the flow of conversation. They don't interrupt. They don't over-explain. They choose their words carefully, making people hang on every sentence. This is why powerful leaders rarely raise their voices. They don't need to. When they speak, people listen, because they have already created an aura of authority through their silence. Research in behavioral psychology also shows that people who stay calm and composed in arguments are far more persuasive than those who get emotional. Why? Because humans are wired to see calmness as confidence. Nietzsche believed that true power comes from self-mastery. The Übermensch is not a slave to his emotions. He decides when and how to respond, and that makes him untouchable. The real reason Nietzsche saw silence as power wasn't because he wanted people to avoid conflict. It was because he knew the one who controls their own reaction controls the entire conversation. If someone insults you and you react, you have lost. If someone challenges you and you feel the urge to defend yourself, you have lost. If you get pulled into an argument just to prove you are right, you have lost. But if you observe, stay calm, and respond only when it serves your purpose, you have already won. In this part, we uncovered the deep psychological traps that make most arguments pointless. We saw how controlling your emotions and choosing your battles makes you powerful. Next, we'll explore how to master conflict, when to engage, when to stay silent, and how to wield words like a weapon. We've explored Nietzsche's philosophy, legendary examples, and the psychology behind arguments. Now it's time to bring it all together. How do you master conflict? How do you decide when to engage, and when silence itself is your strongest weapon? First, understand this crucial difference. Arguing to prove you're right is weakness. Arguing to shape reality is power. Nietzsche wasn't afraid of conflict. He embraced it, but on his own terms. The Übermensch does not argue over petty things, but he also does not run from necessary battles. He knows that conflict is a crucible for growth and mastery. Why do most people avoid arguments? Because they're uncomfortable. But Nietzsche understood that discomfort breeds strength. Imagine a warrior who never enters battle. A blade never tested against steel will never be sharp. In the same way, a mind never challenged remains dull, weak, and fragile. Without intellectual conflict, your ideas remain untested. Without struggle, your convictions remain hollow. Think about the boldest thinkers in history. Galileo was condemned for challenging the Church's view of the universe. Socrates was sentenced to death for questioning conventional beliefs. Nietzsche himself was dismissed as a madman. Yet today, their ideas shape the way we think. Their power came not from silence alone, but from choosing their battles wisely. There is a critical difference between arguing to prove you are right, arguing to shape reality. Nietzsche understood this deeply. Great leaders, philosophers, and visionaries don't avoid arguments. They use arguments strategically. Consider Socrates again. He did not attack others' beliefs directly. He asked questions until their arguments collapsed on their own. Nietzsche's writings were designed to challenge and provoke, to shake people out of mental complacency. Steve Jobs didn't avoid conflict. He used it to push people beyond their limits and drive innovation. Powerful people don't argue for validation. They argue for transformation. They don't fight to win debates. They fight to shape the world in their vision. The Übermensch does not argue to satisfy his ego. He argues with purpose. When should you engage? When the argument sharpens your thinking, when it reveals deeper truths, when it pushes you or others to grow, when it shifts power in your favor. When should you not? When you're just defending your ego, when the other person is closed to change, when it's a pointless emotional battle, when your silence itself is a power move. Arguing without strategy is weakness. Arguing with precision is power. Nietzsche didn't avoid arguments. He embraced conflict on his own terms. If an argument makes you weaker, avoid it. If it makes you stronger, engage with it. If it's a distraction, ignore it completely. Conflict, when mastered, becomes a tool, not a trap. Final reflection. The silent trick that gives you power. Imagine waking up one day and a voice tells you, you only have 100 words left to speak in your entire life. Every word now carries weight. Would you waste them in pointless fights? Would you spend them trying to prove yourself to someone who isn't even listening? Or would you choose each word carefully, like a warrior sharpening his final blade before battle? This is where real power lies. Nietzsche understood that words are currency. The more you spend them carelessly, the less valuable they become. So next time you feel your heart racing in an argument, your mind flooding with comebacks and defenses, stop. Breathe. Ask yourself, who truly holds the power here? The one frantically trying to prove himself? or the one who knows when to stay silent? Silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's control. It's the art of making others question themselves without ever needing to convince them. This is the silent trick that gives you power. Master it. Control your reactions. Choose your battles. Speak only when it serves your purpose. If you want more deep dives on philosophy, psychology, and power, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Stay sharp. Stay powerful.